This is a refinement year for Samsung's phones, there's no doubt about that at all. I've been testing the S23 Ultra for the better part of a couple of weeks now, and if there's one thing that I have to say about this phone so far, it's that small changes can absolutely make a big difference. I'm not gonna pretend that this is an earth-shattering, game-changing update for Samsung's Ultra lineup, but the S23 Ultra is definitely a meaningful upgrade over its predecessor. The smallest change that they've made to this phone is the slight change to the shape of the body and camera lenses. I mean, the phone almost looks identical to the S22 Ultra. The average Joe could not tell the difference between the two. The S23 Ultra has some slightly bigger camera lenses to accommodate that bigger 200 megapixel sensor, and it also has some flatter side rails. I think it's a good move. The phone is more comfortable to hold this year because there's more surface area to grip onto from the sides, and the display glass doesn't curve down over the sides of the phone nearly as aggressively, so there's more flat, usable space for that included S Pen. I do wish they made the display bezels on the front a little bit more uniform this year though. The much cheaper S23 is in a whole different league on that front. Perfectly symmetrical bezels all the way around with curved corners and a flat display. Honestly, I think this is one of the nicest looking Samsung phones that they've ever made. Anyway, the S23 Ultra has the same display that was in the S22 Ultra. It's still a perfectly great 6.8 inch AMOLED display with an adaptive refresh rate that goes from 1 to 120 Hertz. Driving that new display, however, is the new Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, wait for it, for Galaxy. Apparently, Qualcomm has worked with Samsung to deliver a tailor-made chip for the new phones. Are you gonna see any huge increases in performance when compared to other Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 devices? Probably not. But you know what I have noticed? Loads more battery life. Samsung has not actually changed the size of the battery in the S23 Ultra. It's still 5,000 milliamp hours, but because of that new 8 Gen 2 for Galaxy, the phone's a lot more efficient. I've seen some fellow YouTubers say the exact same thing. Some people are getting as much as 2 extra hours of screen on time, which is definitely not insignificant. The S23 Ultra could become the battery king of 2023. We'll just have to see. Another change that you probably won't see written on any spec lists have to do with the speakers. They've actually improved them this year. They're louder, they're more full, with a bit more bass. Now, they won't blow your socks off or anything, but for watching TV shows or YouTube in a pinch, yeah, they're pretty solid. The biggest changes on the Ultra, though, are right here on the back of the phone, the cameras. We've got an absolutely ridiculous, monstrous 200 megapixel sensor back here on the main camera with an aperture of f1.7, and the amount of detail that it captures is, well, to be expected of a 200 megapixel sensor. It's a very, very sharp camera. If you just take the phone out of the box, open up the camera app and snap a picture, it's not actually using all 200 million pixels at once. It's doing some pixel binning to reduce it down to a 12 megapixel image so that it can capture more light. But even if you never use the 200 megapixel mode, it still takes very sharp photos. I did a full video comparing the S23 Ultra's cameras to the iPhone 14 Pro, which you can watch by clicking on the link in the top right-hand corner of this video, but generally speaking, I like the photos coming from the S23 Ultra more than the iPhone 14 Pro most of the time. The colors and sharpness is often better on the S23 Ultra. It's more consistent when shooting in dark indoor scenes, and it does a great job with nailing focus most of the time, even though that it has a large sensor with an f1.7 lens. It can lose parts of an object when close up though. That's kind of just the nature of the beast. You got a big sensor with a small aperture that usually leads to a shallow depth of field. Speaking of beasts, those 3 and 10 times optical zoom cameras are insanely versatile when shooting objects that are far away. Even the digital zoom up to 30 times is still perfectly usable, although I wouldn't use the full 100x digital zoom for anything more than like a neat party trick. I think those zooms would be a lot more useful if we had a telephoto sensor that was bigger than 10 megapixels, because that's all we're getting in the 3 and 10x cameras. If Samsung was able to give us a 100 or even a 50 megapixel sensor in that periscoping zoom lens, those pixelated 100 times digital zooms would look a whole lot better. The weirdest change to this new camera system is on the front. Samsung, on paper, has actually downgraded the selfie camera from 40 megapixels all the way down to 12. Remember what I said about specs not telling the full story though? Near as I can tell, the front-facing camera is actually better on the S23 Ultra than it was last year. My only real complaint about the entire camera system is that persistent shutter lag, which Samsung doesn't seem to be able to defeat for good. I've heard that there's a camera assistant app on the Galaxy Store that allows you to manually change the speed of the shutter for fast-moving objects, but Most people are not gonna wanna download an app to do that. The default camera app should absolutely be capable of doing that automatically like it does on most other phones. Almost everything else on the S23 Ultra is the same as the previous phone. You got a few things like a little bit faster RAM, a little bit faster storage, but I mean, the only other real difference that I can think of is that the base configuration of the S23 Ultra has 256 gigs of storage instead of 128, which is good because Samsung also hasn't increased the price this year. It's staying at $1,200 US, which is where the S22 Ultra was last year. All in all, yeah, I mean, there's some pretty good changes here with very few downsides. Should you upgrade to the S22 Ultra or even the S21 Ultra? No, but for people coming from older, more tired devices, this is a fantastic phone to consider if you've got the cash for it. Hope you liked the video, thanks for watching, and as always, have a great day.